Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's MLC Masterclass series, From Compliance to Value, Transforming Manufacturing Sustainability with Real-Time Data. Before we begin the session, we have just a few housekeeping items. To make you aware, we have muted all participant lines in order to maintain our sound quality throughout the session. However, we do encourage asking questions at any point by placing them either in the chat or the questions box, and we will address them throughout the session or during the Q&A portion of the event. Now, lastly, before introductions, this session will be recorded and it will be sent out via email within 48 hours of our session's conclusion and will be available on the Manufacturing Leadership Council website within 5 to 7 business days. And now, please welcome Stephen Moskowitz, the Senior Director at the Manufacturing Leadership Council. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lauren, and welcome, everybody. Today, we have a great panel of experts that are going to share their insights and expertise on how data can help companies go beyond regulatory compliance to deliver cost savings and emission reductions, establishing sustainability as a strategic priority in the manufacturing industry. Please, as Lauren said, do not hesitate to post questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A box. We will get to them as we have time. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. We have Paul Schuster, Managing Director from North America Sustainability, COE, Vishal Brown, Senior Director of Digital Solutions, and Gadu Sundaram, Innovation Lead for Sustainability, Technology, Strategy, and Advisory, all with NTT Data. Gentlemen, welcome to the call. If you could just kind of introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into the call here. So, Gadu, let's start with you.
Hello, Gadu Sundaram. I've got 30 years delivering enterprise IT solutions. I've spent the last 5 years at the intersection of technology and sustainability. I'm currently the innovation lead in a global sustainability business office and also the chairman of the Green Software Foundation.
Excellent. Thank you. Vishal?
Thank you, Steve, for having us on the panel. Vishal Brown, I lead global strategy for digital workplace, and that's making sure we work with our clients and understanding the market in terms of what type of digital solutions we bring to them so that they can really drive value for the customers they serve, and how do they bring, look at capabilities and initiatives like sustainability as we provide solutions.
Excellent. And finally, Paul.
Thanks, Steve. Paul Schuster, I lead NTT Data's sustainability services for the US and Canada, North America. For those of you who are not familiar with NTT Data, we are one of the world's largest IT services brands. I have a colleague of mine who says that we're one of the largest companies that you may never have heard of. But we really are, kind of the backbone of the internet age, and are positioning ourselves as the leading infrastructure company for the upcoming AI economy as well. You can see some of the stats here. We're the third largest data center provider in the world. One of the top 10 global IT services firms globally as well. And we recognize that that comes with a responsibility as we dive into sustainability as a topic today. We recognize that, being a leader within IT, we really need to help to grow and advance this particular industry with a sustainability forward focus. And so we're excited to be talking with you, Steve, and the broader audience today around what we think sustainability in manufacturing really mean.
Well, thanks. And I think, as you said, it's an exciting thing for the MLC. We often think of NTT Data, for those who know, right? It's one of those companies, if you know what they are, as an advisory firm. But seeing that you're also one of the largest data center providers, right? So you do live the manufacturing world in some sense. And so I think that's an important insight that you're able to provide, not just seeing what other companies are doing, but what you yourselves are doing in the space. With that, let's get into the conversation. So before we get into our first question, for those on the call, we're going to do a couple of quick polls. So Lauren, if you want to open up our first poll, how was your company performing against its sustainability targets? And we'll give you all about 35 seconds here or so to do it. And so we're starting to see a lot on track, which is good, some ahead of schedule, and a few popping up that we don't actually yet have sustainability targets. I think we have we could probably end the poll here. So this one, the numbers are quite clear, right? We're on track, which is a good thing. And we'll talk more about what that means as we go into this. The second poll, if we could open that up, is what are the challenges you're starting to see? We go back to now the second poll. Oh, can folks see the results? Well, we'll call them back up when we need to share them. There we go. All right, our second poll. What challenges are you facing in meeting your sustainability targets? The good old lack of executive commitment. We'll leave this one open for a little bit longer. Lots of interesting data here. All right, I think we're good on that one, unless we got a few more folks want to pop in. That's good. All right, so this one, just to kind of give you the numbers real quick, limited budget and too many challenges and not enough time are the two biggest things. So that's often what we see with things is a lot of those challenges. We want to do everything, but you can't do everything. Second was insufficient data quality and a lack of commitment from the executive team. And again, we will talk about those as we go through the conversation. So let's go into the start of the conversation. We can pull the slides down. So as we saw, sustainability is important, as you've talked about, as we saw in the polls. Companies are still focusing on it. How has sustainability and the importance changed for manufacturing companies? Are manufacturing companies looking at sustainability, especially in today's global environment? What does it really mean? And so let's kind of start thinking about that and what does it mean for today?
So Steve, why don't I start with an answer, and Gadu, Vishal, feel free to jump in. But I think sustainability has always been super important for manufacturing, and despite some of the global headwinds, if you will, around sustainability, it's it's still very, very important. If anything, I think it's become more important to the bottom line of companies to think about sustainability, and less so in terms of just kind of the marketing aspect or the corporate affairs aspect of sustainability. If we've seen anything happen over the course of the last 6 months or so, it's really been more of an emphasis around ROI, around delivering upon bottom line results, upon delivering around business resiliency, around really ensuring that the quality of the sustainability efforts is there. Something I heard somebody say that's pragmatic sustainability, and kind of shifting towards that, which is always good to hear.
Yeah, Gadu, anything, Vishal, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add a quick point there. Just looking back at the poll, right? So the number one answer was limited budget, right? So that's kind of telling right there. And it's almost as if it's as if you need money, limited budget, to take on sustainability initiatives. And that may be one angle to look at it, but actually if you look at sustainability as a way to optimize your costs and save money and actually spend your money better, right? Get more value out of what you're already spending. And that's a different lens to look at it. So it's not, I think it's an interesting way we asked the question of whether the poll was answered. But I think as we go through the slides here and we kind of get into things to how you should be thinking about how you actually spend the money you're already spending, not spend more, spend it efficiently, and actually go on given all the global macroeconomics that's happening, how do you actually save money? So Paul, I know we'll get more into that, but just one perspective on that.
Yeah, and go ahead, Gadu.
Yeah, and I can add just another perspective on that, because if you look at the key goals at sustainability or cost efficiency or business risk driving, the supply chain resiliency, right? There is a certain amount of critical materials, and we're going to reach some some issues with the availability of materials in the supply chain, and the same with energy, right? There's the increasing demand of energy, and these resources are going to become rare. And that's another angle to look at, because that's what even the sustainability goals are driving at. So it's efficiency conversation and sustainability conversation. In the end, like, sort of, they're all looking at creating the same impact. So we've seen organizations where they're doing the same activities and tasks, but they've just changed the positioning. It's now become a business resiliency conversation rather than a sustainability conversation.
So just to kind of build off of that, so we think about ROI, and Paul and Vishal, you talked about cost savings. I do, you talked about risk management and risk mitigation. Is there another perspective of how do you actually use sustainability initiatives to create value as opposed to bottom line? Is there a top line opportunity through sustainability as well?
So we absolutely think so. Not only in terms of driving within the consumer marketplace and the need and foresight around sustainability to that. We just at NTT Data have really taken the stance that we want to embed sustainability into the services and the growth that we have as a company. It's not something that we add on to as an organization. It's something that we really, Vishal will talk a little bit about some of the digital workplace services that we provide, and Gadu will talk a little bit about the IT services solutions that we provide. And you're going to find sustainability not as a premium feature, if you will, but really a part of the actual DNA of the solutions that we go to market with. And I think that that's where a lot of companies are at right now. There was a survey done by EcoVadis just a couple of weeks ago or so that found that 87% of large companies are either increasing or staying the same in terms of the amount of commitment and investment that they're putting into sustainability right now. And that's because of the bottom line and the top line opportunities that come with, focusing on that function.
And to kind of close out on this one, you talked about embedding it in what NTT Data does in terms of the services you provide and how you run. How should manufacturers think about embedding sustainability? Is it a sustainability function that we've seen in the past? Does everybody have a sustainability project? Or what does it mean to really embed sustainability in what we do as companies?
So I'll start again. I think it comes from a couple of different angles. All right. First of all, sustainability is a function of the company. And to Vishal's point earlier, from the poll questions and the responses there, getting executive leadership, getting commitment from executives and management around sustainability as a forward, as a part of how a company goes to market and operates, super important. You're going to do that with it as part of the company. That said, sustainability is becoming similar to quality, and it's becoming similar to AI, and it's becoming something similar to these functions that are woven throughout the entire organization. It definitely needs to sit on its own in order to drive that enhancement and that learning and that capability and the quality of that. But it's not really going to have the impact unless everybody is working throughout it. I hold a Six Sigma green belt from some previous life. All right. And that exists because everybody had to get trained up around quality. Everybody has to get trained up on AI. Everybody has to get trained up on sustainability if you're really going to focus on it.
Gotcha.
And Paul, I could add a few points there too. I think as with any company, right? As you said, with companies, we understand the challenges they have, the value proposition they bring to the marketplace for their customers. And you look at the way they operate today, and it could be where they source goods from. It could be how they create product. It could be where the employees are located, right? Each part of that value chain is how do you reimagine the value chain and understand where are the opportunities for sustainability initiatives, and which is where we'll get into dashboarding and understanding the quality of the data you get and where you can see signals to really capture the opportunity. But to me, having a good understanding of a business process that is today, the KPIs that are embedded within the business process, and then that helps you identify where to make the change, right? So, and again, it goes back to the point of We talked about, cost and doing things more efficiently and finding money where you think money doesn't exist, right? Understanding your business process allows you to really take on those initiatives and carry out sustainability goals.
So I kind of, to close this out, to really kind of get to the theme of the day around data, is one thing you talked about, Vishal, is you have to have the right KPIs. You have to be able to measure. Having the right mentality and training is great, but the reality is we have to be able to measure things, right? We need the data to support how we think about sustainability. So let's kind of dive into that, which is, what do we mean when we think about sustainability, and are we making a shift from kind of historical data where we kind of have our annual reports to real-time data, and what does it mean in the sustainability world when we think about real-time data?
Yeah, let me demonstrate a real world example about how, we talked about it a little bit in the abstract, right? So let's show a real world example here. So within NTT Data, we've always had a service that we provide to our customer for devices as a service. So what does that mean? You think about any of us here. I mean, we're on this call, I'm on my laptop, we're all virtual, right? We're using a device. And as any employee joins that organization, they need some type of physical device to collaborate, right? Be it your mobile device, your laptop, or however you're collaborating on. And pick any organization, and the client size we typically deal with is large enterprise and some mid-market, right? But you're talking about 20, 30,000 employees on the low side and hundreds of thousands on the upper side. So now equate that to devices, and an employee may have anywhere from 1 to 1.5 devices at the minimum. On the higher side, there are 3 to 4 devices. So now take that company size that we're serving and multiply that device count. That's a significant amount of devices in any one company that you're sourcing, procuring, shipping, and managing. So now think about the carbon footprint output that you're doing there, right? So I think we have a slide we want to share that will just kind of walk us through what does that mean. So when NTT Data provides devices as a service to many of our customers that we provide workplace services for, and just for everyone's benefit, what is digital workplace, right? So that, again, that's looking at the tools, assets, and capabilities and support that an employee needs to function in their day-to-day life. So that means the laptop, the applications like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. If you need to call for support, service desk. And if you need high-touch services, so you need a field service agent deployed to wherever work happens. But that was one way we traditionally provided devices as a service. But to the point we're making here, how do we create a sustainable version of this? And that's where this comes in. And so we get into looking at, kind of where we started this topic of readiness and design, looking at the existing business process, how things work today with us and how we deliver the service and device as a service, but how the customer consumes it. How does ordering procurement happens, right? If you think about how we do Amazon today, and Amazon has a little bit of this, right? I'll order 3 devices today, and one will show up tomorrow, one will show up the day after, and one will show up the day after that. So 3 truck rolls, right? How about if I got it all on one day? Think about the sustainability impact there. And it's the same thing with this. Us understanding our distributors, our OEMs like Lenovo and HP and Dell, where is the best shipping point for a device, getting it to, so the ordering and procurement, right? How do we work closely with the shippers like FedEx and UPS? How do we make sure we automate the provisioning so it's not going, for example, traditionally, I'll just share with you an example how this traditionally happened. The device would ship from the OEM, like let's say HP. It'll go to a warehouse. Then one of our guys would get on and configure that in another location. Then they'll take it to the end user. I just went through like 4 steps of that happening, right? And just think about, again, carbon footprint, power consumption, the plug on, turn on, turn off, all that stuff. Now it's factory to employee. It configured at the factory, right to the employee. Day 1 productivity. So that's automated provision. And then, so let's say we do all that, employees, working day 1 and they have day 1 productivity, but now day in the life of the employee. And at some point that device breaks, or in 1 year, the screen cracked or the keyboard broke. Now, do we go back and get another device and send it back? Or can we refurbish that device and remanufacture it with a net 0 carbon footprint? So those are some of the things we're bringing in from a sustainability perspective to reimagine device as a service around sustainable devices as a service. And then there's a support and maintenance and asset management. I'll just add 2 points there is, some of the customers we serve are in high density areas. I'm in Connecticut here in the tri-state. try, deploying a technician in New York City and commuting around New York City or in LA or in Miami or Chicago and any high density city district in the world. And again, sending out multiple times for a single device or for each device, again, can be both expensive, cost per employee, and the amount of times the carbon emissions every time they have to get on a train or take a taxi or an Uber or whatnot. But we do things like self-serve, which is we put a kiosk for example, we serve school districts in New York City. And that kiosk, all the agent is now doing is device fulfillment. They fill the entire kiosk, and someone just goes and grabs the device. So one truck rolls as opposed to 10 truck rolls per week. And so that's an example of where we're really looking at being carbon conscious and some of the capabilities we're bringing to our clients. Paul, anything you want to add there, Gadu?
No, I think you hit the right points there, Vishal. And Steve, just to drive home the point around this idea of real-time data being so necessary to really drive sustainability benefits. I mean, everything that Vishal just laid out there couldn't be done with high fidelity of the data, right? We need to shift our mindsets away from kind of an annual look back around what occurred 12 months ago and start thinking about what's occurring right now and how we can start to have some impact upon that, right? So let me give you two other examples of that, all right? That should resonate with our manufacturing audience here. Okay, one is digital twins within operations, right? If your manufacturing facility does not have a digital twin right now, go and call up your operations team and get them onto that, because every manufacturing facility should have a digital twin. You should be using it for predictive maintenance. You should be using it for understanding what your energy consumption is. You should be using it to identify any sort of problems before they actually become catastrophes, right? And you can only do that if you're really examining data in a real-time format, right? And we use it from a sustainability perspective to get longer lives out of the equipment that we have, to reduce the waste that is being generated, to improve the resource consumption of that operating facility in the first place, so that you can start to Vishal's point earlier, right? Not have to invest new capital into sustainability, but do better with the operations and the capital that you already have, right? So digital twins for operations, great another example of real-time data. The second example I'll bring up is around your supply chain, right? And using real-time logistics, real-time data capture, real-time data analysis to improve how your supply chain is operating, what your carbon footprint is around that supply chain, reducing the amount of energy that's being consumed, getting goods from one point to another, understanding the embodied carbon throughout all of that. All of that is super, super important as well. Work that we've done with a number of different clients already. We've got a very vibrant supply chain operations crew that goes in, does a whole bunch of work around optimizing what that logistics delivery function is, so that you can be as efficient as possible. So I'll leave it there. Gadu, I don't know if you've got any other points that you want to raise either.
Just one follow-up before Gadu, you have a comment here on the digital twin, Paul. So one of the things that we've heard is we hear digital twin a lot, and there's lots of different interpretations. As you think of a digital twin in a factory, and it's really kind of your real-time data versus your model or your plan. Is the digital twin? Can you have the digital twin at the factory, at a piece of equipment, and do you kind of take that same mentality to the digital twin for the supply chain and logistics? Can you apply the same thinking there? And so once you think about a digital twin and learn how to use it, can you be applying that in multiple places?
Absolutely. The benefit of the digital twin is that you're seeing real-time information that's lost to you in a physical reality, right? We're actually even implementing augmented reality into manufacturing facilities right now, so that you can actually see the energy usage that's going on at the equipment site, right? So there's really fascinating technology and processes that can be used both at equipment level as well as the factory level to kind of think about the manufacturing facility of the future, if you will, right? But it goes beyond that as well in the fact that you can use the digital twin to help plan what your next investments are, right? And from a sustainability perspective, because that's where I live, you start thinking about energy efficiency, you start thinking about variable speed drives, you start thinking about different things that you can get into the facility and test it in a digital environment before you actually have to make that physical investment. Same thing on supply chain, and the fact that if you're able to create that digital twin on a supply chain and test out different planning options or different other opportunities, that's a really powerful tool to not only engage with your existing operations, but plan your next set of investments as well.
Gotcha.
And
Thank you.
Steve, maybe to just highlight the digital twin there, if we move forward one slide. So, there's the way to kind of envision where are the opportunities we talked about, right? And so when we look at our clients, we look at the entire business process about delivering sustainable devices service to identify where carbon savings can happen. So you kind of see where the green here represents where there's the most carbon saving, where there's less carbon savings. So there's a lot can be done. But again, it goes back into where are we collecting this data from to create the right dashboard that helps identify and tell the story. So I think as we get more into that, we'll kind of bring that up, how we're actually collecting this data.
And so maybe to kind of close this out, as you think about this, and this is a good slide to show, there's lots of nice green leaves here that are contributors. So how do we start to think about this impact on the sustainability metrics, but also other business metrics, right? How do we kind of take all this and put all this together to say the real value? Where does that? How do we think through that? And I do maybe take a look at that.
Exactly. And this is where I can explain some of our learnings in applying this into our own organization. So for us, we call it the digital supply chain. So we do it end to end. So consulting to data centers, and we think of it as for every software feature that you build, you need equipment to run on that needs to be powered. It needs somewhere to sit, and it needs energy to cool, right? Sort of the entire supply chain. Now, trying to simplify that and selecting the right metrics that will help everyone across this value chain make the right decisions was what we're thinking of, right? And then we looked at sort of what happens in traditional regulatory reporting. So regulatory reporting happens yearly, typically, and it takes a while for us to get any real data. And that data has a lot of sort of accounting techniques embedded into it, and market-based sort of metrics added and things like that. So it wasn't really useful for people on the ground to make decisions. It was like driving using your rear view mirror, right? So we wanted something that was real, that gave you real feedback. For example, right, our software services, they have releases every 2 weeks. How do you, right, sort of know what difference that you're making? So we picked these bottom-up metrics that tied into the levers that you have to make an impact. So energy, right, in your energy use, your equipment use, the embodied emissions of your equipment, how you're, how efficiently you're using your equipment, the grid carbon intensity, when are you running your workloads, where you're running your workloads. So these key levers, we rolled that up to create the appropriate metrics, and we plugged into these real-time measurements. And when we put this into the hands of people making decisions at every level, they come up with optimizations. They can check that immediately. So they can say, okay, hey, there's a code change here that saves me X amount of energy that sort of for every run. So that's cumulatively so much. So here's sort of how I'm using servers, and I can consolidate servers. Here's how I can consolidate on the cloud. So it drives real impact for us. So that's where sort of we got real benefit. The other big learning in choosing the right metric was choose an intensity metric. So traditional reporting normally chooses totals. So you have for example, for an organization, say, okay, that's that particular department or product line, sort of had a carbon impact of 200, sort of tons, footprint of 200 tons. Now, if your business increases, if you've sold more units last year, that'll give you a higher number, right? Like if your business wasn't doing well, that's a lower number. But all of us are incentivized to provide the best possible experience for our customers and sell more, right? So I want sort of more users on my platforms, right, that I build. Now, having more users automatically increases my footprint. So how do I get incentivized? So that's when we selected intensity metrics, select sort of the metric per user, right? So that's in your control, right? So and this is something that can be applied to manufacturing, that sort of select a metric that's per unit, right? So if you decrease sort of the impact, sort of, let's say even carbon footprint per unit, that'll sort of be a better metric, and then you can use the bottom measurements to help optimize that.
Gotcha. Interesting. And we're going to talk about that. So I think one of the critical things there is back to the data is having good data, right? Having data that you can trust, that makes sense. And so I think from there, let's get to the third polling question, which is really around data itself. So if you could pop that up, I'd probably pull that slide down. Just give us a minute. So the third polling question as it comes up, here we go. How confident are you in your organization's sustainability data quality for actually informing your digital strategy, sustainable digital strategy? And so to Gadu's point, right? If you're going to base everything off of data and you don't have good data, let's start there. Right, and we're seeing again a good middle line here where some processes are in place, but definitely room for improvement. And so let's kind of dive into that a little bit in terms of how do we think about the importance of data accuracy and data quality as we go forward. Because I know the next thing we're going to talk about is the ICT, the carbon calculator. But how important is it to make sure you actually have good data first?
It is good decisions are predicated on good metrics, which are then predicated on good data, right? That's true. However, sort of it's extremely difficult to do that at scale. We know the challenges on the ground. And this is where an approach that we took was strive for the most accurate data possible, but don't get stuck up on absolute numbers, right? Do for us, sort of we created a baseline and then sort of continuously measure and move forward, right? Take action, right? Don't wait for the perfect data, sort of that's very difficult. So that's the option that we took. Said less baseline. We know relatively we're moving in the right direction. Let's keep it sort of taking action to make an impact.
Gotcha. Yeah, don't wait for perfection. It's better to start now. We see that in a lot of our AI conversations. You have to start today. I think sustainability is if you wait for perfection, you're going to keep waiting, and you'll be behind. So one of the things you talked about, Gadu, was starting to actually use the data. And so can you talk a little bit about what NTT has done in terms of actually creating a tool to start to use this data in a more complete way?
Yes. So we looked at our end-to-end value chain, and our approach to implementing sustainability at scale was at a very high level. We had a vision. The vision at an organizational level, global organizational level, was translated to 13 materiality topics. They said so these are the things that we as an organization care about. Those materiality topics were then translated to KPIs for our CXOs globally, right? And they had a KPI, right? Like, sort of where they were responsible for. So that's kind of like, so that's top down. Now, because of the nature of, right, like, sort of what we do, there are lots of different services that have their own, that exist in their own world, like, sort of, and they've got their own employees, like, all motivated by something different, like, sort of, and all exist in silos. How do we apply this across all of these different silos? That's what we were thinking of. So once the CXOs have the KPI, we wanted to provide them this data, right, that help them to understand where they stand and then help make the right decisions at every level. So that's why, right, like, we built this comprehensive tool that we then deployed. We plugged into the appropriate the metrics that we selected, like, to provide to us AXOs, where again, like, sort of these intensity metrics that had these levers which you can use to make change. So for us, it was electricity usage, it was embodied emissions, the device usage, the embodied emissions, for example, for the data center, it was the non-IT load, the overhead, and, like, sort of the IT load, like, sort of the IT energy, the embodied emissions of the buildings. Then, like, sort of for the IT equipment, it was the how well you sweated out the equipment, like, sort of hardware efficiency. And then, like, sort of the how you're leveraging the grid carbon intensity, right? Like, sort of the location and the time, like, when you run your workloads. So we incorporated, like, sort of these levers into metrics. Then for every service, we tapped into where can I, like, sort of get this value. And we built adapters, like, to tap into existing frameworks, so existing monitoring tools, observability tools, et cetera, and that's something that, like, sort of we've surfaced in these simple, like, sort of KPIs at a high level, which address, like, sort of both the end-to-end view and the dependencies between them, but also, right, like, provides each particular, like, area or domain the metrics necessary to make the right decisions. Now we've left optimization to the individual, right, like individual domains where they know well, right, like, sort of once they understand, right, like, sort of what the metrics are telling them, and once they understand the levers that they have, there are lots of ways in which, like, sort of they can optimize.
Steve,
And
let
so
me
you,
let me just put a really fine point onto that, okay? Because without this ICT carbon calculator and using it within NTT data, we wouldn't have the fidelity and the quality of information to pull any of those levers. We'd be firing blind in a dark room, right? It's really a powerful tool to really understand when are we running our assets, and how is that related to the power on the grid. How are we consuming electricity and creating carbon emissions because of that? It's a really fascinating tool that Gadu has set up here, and it talks to this need to stop thinking about reporting on an annualized basis and the blunt instrument that provides us, and thinking about data and the levers that we have to affect our carbon emissions more on a real time type of facility.
and so one of the things you had mentioned before when we talked about digital twin was kind of a micro, level versus a macro level, where you could have digital twins at multiple levels. And this again gives you the ability to understand at a data center level what's happening, but also are you able to do a better job of learning across data centers, and how do you optimize what works maybe in one data center because of what's available with a local grid in terms of maybe solar or wind that's not available somewhere else, that is able to help share learning in new ways.
Yeah, so I think this, and it helps put a common lens across, like, sort of across the entire estate, and the more you simplify that, the better
Gotcha.
it'll be adopted, right? And the better impact that you can create. So that's what, like, sort of we try to work on, simplify metrics, and then, like, sort of gave each domain, like, sort of something to work on. Particularly related to data centers, again, like, sort of we've got an approach which is consume less, do better, do different, right? And that's an approach, like, sort of we've applied, for example, at the software level. Our thinking is the greenest application is the one that you did not build, right? And down at the bottom, like, at the data center level, the greenest kilowatt is the one that you did not use, right? So that's, like, sort of that kind of, like, mindset drive optimization across the value chain.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
Kadu, I
so
could,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Vishal.
I just want to add, so that's at the data center level, right? And so let's apply that a little bit to the employees as well. Very same principle, which is if I don't need to refresh that device that employees are using, why should I, right? Because if I could sweat it longer. And so, for example, most companies today get a laptop or a device on a 2-year contract. And so if I'm looking, there are tools that could measure the productivity of the employee and the uptime and performance of that asset. And if I know it's performing at good enough, depending on that employee's own workloads and their own work streams, there's no reason to refresh that device, and it extends the life of the device. So when I talked earlier about SDaaS, right, sustainable DaaS, we've also reimagined that a little bit from SDaaS, from sustainable DaaS to smart DaaS, and just doing it smartly. I'm only refreshing that device when I need to. So that way, when we talked about earlier about engaging our supply chain and all the global macroeconomic disruptions that are happening, if I have the ability to sweat that asset longer or move it around within my enterprise, so that way I'm right-sizing the device to the employee and reusing existing assets, that's not only sustainable, better sustainability use, but a smarter use of assets. So that's another way to think about it.
Gotcha. So this is helpful. I mean, it's a great tool. In both the sustainable device example as well as now the carbon calculator. I think what's been nice is you've been able to use these internally, and then you're bringing them to clients. But we also know that introducing new tools is never easy, right? It doesn't always go seamlessly. So what were some of the challenges with getting your data center leaders to actually start using this tool and managing differently? As Paul said, we wanted to manage our business as if sustainability is important. So how have they actually been able to use this, and what were some of the challenges you had to overcome in that transition?
I think the key approach we took was, like, in this bottom up and a top down approach, where the KPIs, like, sort of come top down, and then, like, the enablement and the tools and the frameworks we provide, like, sort of bottom up. So we enable people to then, like, sort of, okay, start making the right decisions, right? Like, giving them the ability to do the right decisions. And this is where, like, sort of it's a journey. If it was easy, would have done it by now, right? But this is what, like, so we are and it's great to work for a company that, like, sort of that's taking it seriously, and we're doing it, like, internally. Like, we want to eat around dog food, or like, drink around champagne, however you call it, right? Like, so for me, our internal teams, our, like, internal CIO is my client zero, right? And that's the approach that we've taken. We are doing it, like, sort of in by domain, like, the enablement is progressing, particularly related to data centers. There's already, like, sort of a really good approach with 3 that, like, sort of levels. So consume less, do better, and do different, right? And we've got, like,
And
a whole roadmap. Yeah.
have you actually been able to see now results in those data centers based on this tool where the teams are making different decisions than they would have made before?
Yes, so they're starting to make decisions across that, like, sort of all the areas: data centers, networks, hardware assets,
That's great.
cloud applications, right? And they're all, like, sort of, we're all moving towards the same purpose. Different, like, areas will move at different speeds, but, right, like, sort of we're moving in the right direction.
Gotcha.
Steve,
All right.
if I can follow up
Please.
on that. All right. You bring up an interesting point in the fact that by providing the data and providing the insights to the data centers, they're able to make decisions, right? Like they weren't going to take these actions without this data in front of them driving this, right? And you know, to Gadu's point, we do take a bottom-up and a top-down approach. You know, every single one of our executives have their compensation tied to KPIs, and one of those KPIs is reduction in emissions and sustainability. You know, here in 2025, right? So they're driving decisions to sit there and say, like, you have to do something, and the data is naturally driving impact, right? We see that, and I'm going to take it a little bit outside of our you know real-time data conversation here, but we see that just in procurement, right? You know, to our audience, you know, as you're procuring services, as you're procuring solutions from your broad supply chain, whether it's NTT data or not, ask for a sustainability metric in there, all right? Because the architects who are solutioning that particular engagement with you are going to think about things differently with that sustainability metric, and they're going to drive operational efficiencies out of that. And we see that like with Vishal on devices, where if you're just asking for a refresh of devices and you're not asking for a sustainability bent to that, then you're missing on the opportunity to sweat that. You're missing on the opportunity to drive refurbishment. You're missing on the opportunity to put predictive telemetry into those devices. You know, it starts with getting the data and driving that data all the way through.
Yeah, I think you make an important point, and it's something that we've seen in other conversations. You know, step one, for example, with procurement is asking your suppliers for the data. Step two was showing them that you're going to actually make decisions based on that data. And so we see a lot of people say, well, I'm going to collect the data from my suppliers on sustainability, but I'm still going to make decisions based on my traditional metrics or KPIs. And so using that in your decision making is the next piece of it. And that's where we've had this conversation with folks, you know, with NTT data before and others. Going from data to insights to decisions is really where we're going to need to go to get to value. So
Absolutely, couldn't say it better.
So we got a couple minutes left here. Just a couple of follow-up questions, things that are happening around the world that maybe have an impact. First one is AI. So we haven't talked about AI really at all in this conversation, which is always shocking when we don't talk about it. What is the role of AI in the carbon calculator or in our digital twins or in sustainability overall? Where's that gonna fit in as you think about it? Not just obviously you need data centers and it's going to drive data centers, but how we're going to use AI to help us going forward.
Yeah. And I can take that question. So we are acutely aware of like, you know, sort of the disproportionate impact that AI will have on energy. So so we've got like, you know, we're looking at it at two angles, right? So one is sustainable AI. So looking at our own backyard, what's the carbon footprint of it, like in AI, right? Like, you know, sort of what's the impact, like, you know, sort of what's the sustainability impact of AI. We released a white paper just a couple of weeks ago, right? Like, you know, sort of a pretty detailed white paper. You can look it up on our website.
And we'll send it out as part of our follow-up to everybody.
Yeah, and we're also looking at like, you know, sort of, you know, AI, right, like, you know, sort of helping out sustainability, right, like, you know, so AI for sustainability, right? And we are developing, like, you know, sort of set of propositions. We're working very closely with the sustainability team. You know, for example, right, like in our entire compliance and like, you know, sort of annual reporting process, we're looking at like, you know, sort of, okay, can AI help to optimize that? And we're using it ourselves, right? Like, you know, sort of CSRD reporting is another example. And we are looking at like, you know, sort of all the other areas where we're working in sustainability to say that like, how can it help sustainability? Now, there's some important things happening here. Again, like, you know, sort of the Europe, in Europe, we are part of like, you know, an organization called the European Green Digital Coalition, and that's EGDC. And through that, last year, we created a methodology for assessing the net impact, sustainability impact. So the you know we are very confident that the way to scale sustainability solutions is through the use of technology, and AI is a core part of it. We also realized that the solution itself will have a small footprint, right? Like it will have a footprint. And we're looking at sort of the net impact that it can create, right? So, and that's our approach. So we're looking at both the aspects, sustainable AI and AI for sustainability. As part of the GSF, we are pioneering new metrics. So SCI for AI is something sort of that we're working on currently, likely to be an ISO. We're taking it through the ISO process, likely to be an ISO standard by the end of the year. And we are pioneering that within our AI services to actually sort of measure the sustainability impact of AI. So there's a lot we're doing in that area.
Excellent.
And then, Steve, let me just add a couple more onto that, okay? Because over in Europe, there's a deforestation regulation to make certain that any sort of work that you're doing doesn't necessarily tear down, forests that should be protected in some way. We use AI with satellite imagery to make certain that you can actually track and monitor that, comply with the EUDR, which is the regulation that's in question here. Lots of different applications from that side. We also use AI from a resiliency perspective, as extreme weather events are becoming more impactful around the economic business model of companies, whether it's in the supply chain or at the facilities themselves, being able to track the risks of wildfires in a certain area or the hurricane risks or anything like that. We use AI to actually go through and track all of that type of information so that you can make better decisions around the business model resiliency that you have and any sort of investments or decisions that you need to be making around that.
Oh, that's exciting. Vishal.
Yeah, I think one of the main areas we use AI and Gen AI is really in service operations, right? So when you looked at that full life cycle of DaaS, and there's a digital twin model of that, right? So it may seem simple on a screen, but each one of those leaves or those blocks in the pinwheel could have its own pinwheel. And so as you put a digital twin against that, you kind of go, how do you really find areas to drive sustainability initiatives? I'll give you a couple examples. So for example, when a call comes into our service desk and they're troubleshooting a laptop that may be broken, they got to make a decision. Do I replace this? Do I go back take one from the OEM? And so we're leveraging Gen AI to understand, is that laptop performing at the productivity level that it should? So it's proactively going out, checking the health of that device, and making a recommendation to the service desk agent about the next best action. And that's Gen AI in action, right? Or when it's finished with that, it's if the service desk agent made a good decision and it solved not just that one tactical problem, but it's solving the next 100 problems. It's now creating a knowledge object, so that way the other service agents can now use that information. In addition to that, it's taking that and automating that resolution using Gen AI to orchestrate what you can do at scale, right? And that's where Gen AI comes in and agentic AI comes in. So you can see how we're leveraging AI for just looking at the digital twin of the process, Gen AI to generate content, generate knowledge objects, and using agentic AI to orchestrate the automation process.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think Dadu, as you said at the very beginning of it, we're getting to the point now where AI and sustainability are going to be tied hand in hand, right? You can't do one without the other. And as much of the challenge that sustainability challenges AI is going to create, it's also going to help create some of the solutions that are out there. So I think it's an exciting time, and I think something like the tool that you provided, being able to apply some advanced AI capabilities against the tool, against the digital twins, is really the next step forward, and some great things coming. So, final words, gentlemen, that you'd like to share. We'll start with you, Purdue.
You know what? Why don't I start? Okay.
All right, we'll go that way. We'll go that way.
The fact that I just jumped in anyways, and I cut Gadu off. But my final word, Steve, is sustainability is here. It's embedded. I've been in the sustainability world for 20 plus years, right? And it is more embedded into our business operations than it ever has been. It's a part of how we think about things, and it drives ROI for our operations, right? So the more we can get our handle around the data that's needed, the more we can get our arms around the options that we have to impact that, it drives real business value, whether it's on the resiliency or the economic side.
Fantastic. Kaidu?
For me, I'd take a slight different spin. I think the issues that we are facing, so climate and critical minerals and water shortages, all of that are real. It not only sort of affects the planet, it affects each one of us, and it affects businesses, right? Now, any mitigation is a win for all three, right? It helps the business, it helps us, it helps the planet. So whatever your driver is, I just urge you to take action, right? Don't wait for that, ideal situation, and take action now is what I'll leave you.
Fantastic. Michelle, final word.
Yeah, I'll just say what Garu mentioned. Sustainability is not a destination, right? It's a journey. And so there will continue to mature this as we move forward and get better KPIs, better fidelity in the data we're doing, and find new ways to reimagine how we deliver this and have a more sustainable planet. So that's kind of one. The other area I'd mention is just as we move forward, there are different ways we can all contribute and be better corporate citizens. And that's part of how we deliver value for our own company, how we do that for customers. So I think it's just like I said, it's a journey and not a destination.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for your time. Thank you, NTT Data, for what you're doing as a leader in this space and for sharing your knowledge. For those on the call, we have two more quick things as reminders. Speaking of sustainability, we have some upcoming plant tours, including one at United Scrap Metal, where we will be talking about the recycling and waste management side of sustainability, which is vital for a lot of manufacturers. We then have a plant tour at General Motors in Tennessee and Eclipse Automation in Ontario, Canada. So please, more information coming on those. You can scan there. We'll send you out more information. And finally, thank you again for your time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights. If you have any questions, please reach out to mlcinfo@nam.org, and we'll be following this up with some follow-on material, including the white paper that Gadu mentioned and some other material from NTT Data, as well as from the MLC. And with that, I wish everybody a wonderful weekend, and enjoy the rest of the summer. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.